thank the chairman and the ranking member for organizing this hearing, and I thank our witnesses for their time and their tremendous public service. I represent the St. Louis metro area, which is home to the largest Bosnian community outside of Bosnia and Herzegovina. About 20 years ago, our Bosnian neighbors fled to St. Louis after war criminal Ratko Mladic initiated a horrific genocide against majority Muslim Bosniaks. The Dayton Agreement ended the Bosnian War in 1995, as we know, but today, Russia is undermining the peace agreement. Frankly, they're undermining peace and freedom, as we've seen in Syria, as we've seen in Georgia, the Ukraine, our own elections, now in Venezuela, and across the globe. But they're undermining the peace agreement by encouraging separatists in the Serb-majority Republika Srpska. I am deeply concerned that Russia is fueling ethnic divides in the interest of weakening the Bosnian state. Ambassador Fried, how can the United States counteract Russian activities in Bosnia?
The Russians are acting throughout the Balkans to try to prevent those countries from drawing closer to or joining the EU and NATO. An attempted coup in Montenegro, the Russians tried to block the agreement between Greece and North Macedonia, which is one of the best pieces of news to come out of the Balkans in years. And I am reasonably confident that the Russians would rather instigate conflict rather than let Bosnia and Herzegovina succeed in reforming itself. So I think they are playing the card of potential secession of Republika Srpska, to prevent that from happening, and also to prevent Serbia, which is the big game, from turning westward in a decisive way. What we can do is principally show up, work with Europe in support of plans to integrate all of these countries into the West, have them draw closer to the European Union and get on track for EU accession. That's powerful. The EU has money. Russia doesn't. The EU throughout Europe and throughout the Balkans means prosperity.
Well, the EU needs to engage, because I'm very concerned about this. And further, let me just say, because I've got such limited time, further, in Georgia, Russia uses a strategy of, I'll call it creeping annexation, to quietly seize more and more Georgian sovereign territory. Sometimes it's yards at a time. Today, Russia has managed to convert about 20% of Georgia's internationally recognized territory to disputed territory. General Keane, how should the U.S. response to Russian aggression in Georgia differ from its response to the Ukraine conflict, where Russia moved much more quickly and decisively?
Appreciate the question. We have begun to take some steps to assist them. Certainly, last year we provided them anti-tank weapons to the Georgian military, and we conducted some critical military exercises with the Georgians right on the 10th anniversary of Russia's invasion. So we're not ignoring them, certainly. And I also think what we need to do is encourage our European allies to be as involved as we have begun to be in Georgia. Also, obviously, they already are dealing with Ukraine. I don't believe for a minute that the issues of success that Russia has enjoyed using a hybrid warfare, that we have to cede that to that success. We have significant geopolitical influence. We have economically things that we can do, and certainly militarily there's some things.
Well, we all must collectively step up in NATO, the EU, and the U.S. Russia's behavior has been increasingly aggressive in the Sea of Azov and the Kerch Strait. After Russia seized the 3 Ukrainian vessels near the strait last November, the United States conducted a freedom of navigation operation in Peter the Great Bay, the first since the Cold War. Ambassador Newland, what other methods can the U.S. use to encourage Russia to comply with international laws that govern the use of maritime commons?
Well, we eventually did exact some sanctions, but it took about 6 months. If we had been ready ahead of time and been able to move quickly and move in a way that had hurt the Kremlin a little bit more, we might have been able to have more immediate impact. But what's most important, I think, is how do you keep Russia from accreting into more Ukrainian territory?
Right.
So when they build this bridge across the strait, and then they landlock essentially with that bridge major grain ports of Mariupol and Berdyansk in Ukraine, they essentially gain by sea what they couldn't gain by land. So my favorite idea, and I don't know whether the administration considered it, was put forward by Carl Bildt, former Swedish prime minister and foreign minister, which would have been to have the OSCE or some coalition of interested neutral naval powers like Finland and Sweden offer patrolling to keep the Sea of Azov open for both Ukraine and Russia. And that's the kind of passive eyes on the street, if you will, that we might have been able to organize and help pay for.
Very important. I'm glad we had the testimony today for the record to submit to the administration. I have run out of time. I appreciate the chair's indulgence. I thank you all for your service, and I yield back.